This video is going to demonstrate how to create a simple sheet metal drawing using Autodesk Inventor. We're going to be looking specifically at drawing a galvanized steel angle. We're going to draw angle A21 as an example. This angle A21 has an 18 gauge galvanized steel. It'll have 2 holes in each leg. The diameter of those holes is 5/32 of an inch, and it will be chamfered on the corners. The sizes of the chamfers is 1/4 of an inch. If we look at it in the catalog here and look at the example, as we zoom up on that, I can zoom up in that here. You'll see that it has 2 different legs, W1 and W2. W1 has a size of 2 inches here, and W2 has a size of 1 1/2 inches. And then the length for A21, this distance here is 1 3/8 inches. Okay, it has holes for it says 0.148, which turns out to be a 10-penny nail. It has to be a little bit bigger than that, and there's 2 of those in the corners. This page doesn't give any explanation on how big those or where the placement of those holes are. However, I've looked at that and measured it, and I'll be showing you how to do that as an example in here. So going to Autodesk Inventor, the first thing we want to do is create a new part file. And because we're going to be doing sheet metal, we want to start with this standard sheet metal style here. So I'll say create that. So now that we're in the sheet metal environment, you'll see that some of the tools are a little bit different here. We don't have extrude and revolve and some of those. We do have face, okay, and we have a contour flange. But before you begin modeling, you want to come in and modify the sheet metal defaults. So I'm going to obviously I'm going to come in here and click on the tool, and I don't want to use the default tools or default sheet metal rules, but I'm going to change that. So I'll choose edit the sheet metal rule, and I'm going to start by creating a new one, and this is going to be 18 gauge galvanized steel. Okay, so I'll call it 18 gauge galvanized. And now that it's set up here, I can say, okay, the material is not generic, but it's going to be steel galvanized. And my thickness for 18 gauge is 0.0516. We're not going to worry about changing the K factor. We'll let the K factor work here, and our miter rip and seam gap, we're going to leave that as the thickness. On the bend tab, we're going to change that from a straight to a round, even though it's not going to affect us on this part. And then on the corner tab, we're going to also change that from trim to bend. We're going to make that round as well. So now that we've got those changes here, we can save those changes. And I'm going to double click here to set that current and choose save and close. You'll notice now that our sheet metal rule is 18 gauge galvanized. The thickness is 0.0516, and it's going to be using that sheet metal rule. So next thing we can do now is we can start our sketch. So I'll say start a new sketch. I'm going to start on that plane there, and again we've got to think about how big this is going to be. Okay, so if I just make a little rectangle here so that we kind of have an idea. If I go back here, remember A21, the length is 1 3/8, and this W2 width here is 1 1/2. So it's going to be 1 1/2 by 1 3/8. Okay, so I'll put my dimensions in here. This distance here is 1 1/2, 1.5, and this distance here is 1 3/8, 1.375. Okay, so now we've got our base flange here done. We can choose finish this sketch, and I can use the face tool to create that first feature. The face is basically just like extrude, except that it only extrudes at the thickness of the material according to the sheet metal rule that we created. And that's why I created the rule first. So now when I choose apply, you'll see that it creates that sheet metal face. I can choose cancel, and now I've got that first face done it's the right size. The next thing we want to do is create the flange that sticks up. If I go back again and look at this, it's now W1 distance that we want it to stick up, which is 2 inches here, okay? So if I come back over here, I'm going to use the flange tool, and I want that distance, I want it to be 2 inches. So I'll type in 2, and then I need to pick the corner that I want to flange. So I can come in here and pick that corner. And I'm going to zoom up on this, and you can see what happens here is it's already set to the correct size. So it's doing to the bend face here, which basically means that if I look at the side view, you know, we've got it 1.5, which was from that outside edge to the back, which is exactly where it should be, okay? And our distance is 2, so it's going from the bottom, okay, all the way up to the top. That's this lower one here. So from the bottom to the top, and that's our height datum there. So now I can choose OK. So now I've created the first flange. Notice that it says flange here. The last thing we need to do is come in and, well, next 2 things we need to do is add our holes and our chamfers on the corners, and then we'll be done with this part. So I like to use a sketch to place my holes. So I'll come in here and I'll say I want a new sketch on this surface. Okay, and I'll use the point tool to place a couple of points on here. Then we'll dimension those, so they're going to be 3/8 of an inch over. Again, it doesn't give you any information on the website about this. I actually measured one that I had here so that I could get these dimensions. And this is also 3/8, and I'll just make that equal there. And this distance here is also 3/8. So I'll make that one equal there. I'm making them all equal to this one right here, okay? And then finally, this one here is 7/8 of an inch. Okay, so I've got my 3 holes there, okay? And, or my 2 holes there, and they're fully dimensioned. So I can say finish that sketch, and then I'll use my hole tool. Notice that I've already got my dimension in here, 156, that's 5/32 of an inch. It selects the 2 holes, they're going all the way through, so I can say OK here. And I can do the same thing on this second flange here, so I'll say let's start a sketch on this flange. And I'll just do it in this view so you can kind of see what's going on here. Again, I need to have my holes in here like this, okay? And I'll dimension those so I know that this dimension here, it's going to be the same as it was on the top, which is dimension 13. And this one is also the same, dimension 13. And this one is also the same, dimension 13. And then this one was dimension 15 or 16. Okay, so now they're equal. I can say finish that sketch and put my holes in there, and I know that it's going to work correctly, so I can just hit go. The last thing we need is I need my chamfers on the corners. Okay, again, if I come back here and I look at the picture, see it's got these chamfers on the corners. Okay, so we'll go to the corner chamfer tool, and again, I already have this set up with my corner distance of 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to pick all 4 of those corners in the same feature. Choose OK. And that is how you do a very simple sheet metal part using Autodesk Inventor.